Golf's second major of 2021 coming up this weekend. It is the PGA Championship at Kiawah Island Golf Resort. It is a long course. We're going to break things down from a DFS perspective, let you know who stands out, what type of golfers we should be targeting for this week, and just get you set for DFS on FanDuel. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gdula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, major number 2 coming up this weekend. How you doing?
Good. Everything's been going smoothly this morning for us. You didn't have any technical difficulties. As soon as we went live, I didn't punch my microphone and shake my entire desk. I thought I was going to lose my computer or my microphone. So, it's been a little bit of a rough 5 minutes for us, but it's all worth it because we've got a great hour or so ahead as we dissect this 2021 PGA Championship.
An hour or so for my Mac to live before I send GarageBand into the ether. So I think that, living on borrowed time, maybe I'll be in a better mood by the end, but no guarantees. I think the one thing that does help from a mood perspective is this is a major, which means it's a very good field. And Brandon, I don't have to use dudes I don't want to use. There are viable options in every salary tier, but I think that it also leads to some ambiguity. You can see this in the odds. The odds are, after Rory, very flat. And there doesn't seem to be a definitive standout guy who is the favorite for this week, which is kind of fun, but it also means we have a lot of decisions to make. What's your read so far on things as they stand right now? Are you feeling pretty similar? There's no standout one must-have guy?
Yeah. The one quote-unquote superstar, that we would talk about in the clear top 5, who I'm most drawn to is Dustin Johnson. But he did just withdraw from the Byron Nelson with what he cited as knee discomfort, but he's also been doing backflips off of his yacht or boat. I don't know what the difference is between a yacht and a boat, where that distinction is.
I think it's a size thing. I'm guessing he doesn't have a boat.
I'm assuming he has a yacht, yeah. But so I'm leaning toward DJ, but it's just sort of he's from South Carolina. He cited this course as one of his favorites. He played here in 2012, which we'll talk about. But I also I give picks to Golf Digest each week, and I have to recommend a fade. And I've gone through every one of the top, the guys who are 20-1 or shorter. And I'm like, who are these guys am I fading? And I'm like, I don't feel good about saying I'm going to fade any of these guys. Now, I naturally will on FanDuel just because I can't play everyone, but it's not because, they're like you're saying, there's not that these are the favorites, this is the guy, this is the other guy, and these are the ones who don't really stack up. It is razor thin. My win simulations have it all really close. We're seeing that pretty much in the betting market. So, it's a week where I think we have to let popularity kind of push us toward the better plays at the top.
Right, for sure. And we're going to talk more about this later today, too. Brandon has his PGA Q&A. That is at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. There you can go ask Brandon questions about head-to-heads, betting, daily fantasy, what his numbers say about various golfers. 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. So make sure you tune in then to get the full rundown of Brandon's thoughts on this course. Let's talk about Kiawah. It is in South Carolina, as Brandon mentioned. This is an island, but it is the ocean course. I will note that I went into this assuming weather would be a major issue from a wind perspective. It actually doesn't look like it will be, given that it's an island. I kind of thought that would be an issue. It's not. What will be an issue is length. It is 7,876 yards. That was an 8 as a second number there. 7,876 in a par 72. It hosted the 2012 PGA Championship. It is the longest major championship course in the history of the PGA Tour. It's a long boy. It is 200 yards longer than it was back in 2012. There are 6 holes in this course longer than 500 yards. You're going to have to go pretty far to do well for this weekend. There are 156 golfers in the field. Slightly different cut rules this week. It's the top 70 plus ties make the cut after 36 holes. So slightly more lenient, but still pretty tough with 156 golfers in the field. So Brandon, we do have some data from Kiawah Island Golf Resort, and it came from the 2012 PGA Championship. What did you see there as far as things we should emphasize from a stats perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, there have been course upgrades. It's lengthened, so this isn't going to play 1-to-1 with what we saw in 2012, but we did see Rory win by 8 strokes, and you mentioned this in your research, but you were like, 2012 was before we covered golf like heavily, and you realize once you look back how good Rory was compared to the rest of pretty much everyone else on the PGA Tour, and he played really well, so he won by 8, and like that's kind of skewing things. If you look, what did the winner do well, or what what's his archetype? And it's like Rory at his peak was who ran away with this. But it's going to play a bit differently. But we do know a few things, and I don't think we throw out everything that we saw in 2012. This is the hardest course in the country based on slope and course rating, for whatever that's worth to you. The field average on Friday in 2012 was like a 78. It got pretty gnarly. It was really difficult. So that's within the range of outcomes. It's going to depend a lot on the weather. But really what we're looking at is lots of bunkers. And I watched a lot of YouTube videos of just people playing Kiawah, but lots of bunkers just kind of everywhere. Lots of undulation, or a good amount for a US course. And the greens are paspalum, which I was actually listening to the No Laying Up podcast that Jordan Spieth was on. And he actually thought, when he was talking about it, he said, oh, they're Bermuda greens, so like that's going to be good for me. And then Chris Elman, their host, corrected him. But I've done some research, and paspalum is grainy, similar to Bermuda. So I'm looking at Bermuda to a degree, but that's just something that's kind of thrown in there. Some other long courses that we can have that also have average green sizes on the PGA Tour with paspalum or Bermuda greens, if in case, digging a little bit deeper, because we don't have a whole lot to go off of. But these are some of the courses that could maybe play somewhat similarly. Not all of these are coastal, but TPC San Antonio, Country Club of Jackson, which is the Sanderson Farms Championship, Concession, Corrales Golf Club. But what I typically talk about is the key stats, these types of things for the course. And so I'll get into that now. It's going to be an emphasis on driving distance, which you alluded to. Accuracy does matter, though, and strokes gained off the tee, I think, is really the vital stat for me. We did see some really short hitters actually finish top 10 here in 2012. I know it's longer now, but if you can gain strokes off the tee and hit your long irons well, I think you're still going to be in the mix, as long as you're not hitting out of these fairway bunkers, time and time again. Strokes gain approach, greens and regulation, those guys who did that well in 2012, not in the tournament, but on the full season, played well at the PGA Championship, which is what you would expect. So really, for me, my key stats are strokes gain approach still over driving. So approach number 1, off the tee number 2, distance number 3, but don't bake those in. Like, don't give too much weight on distance if you're already factoring in off the tee. Strokes gain putting on Bermuda, just because we don't have any paspalum splits, and then bogey avoidance because it should play tough, even if it's not as tough as it could be.
Would you say, given the increased length on the PGA Tour since 2012, would you say distance is a borderline prerequisite for inclusion, or does the importance of accuracy, does that keep some of the other guys who might be crossed off due to distance, does that keep them in play? Because, like you said, accuracy does matter too. So for me, distance is not necessarily a prerequisite. Strokes gained off the tee is. Okay. So that puts someone like Webb Simpson or Matt Fitzpatrick, still on my list. I like those guys because I think they'll go a little bit overlooked because of that. Oh, it's 7,800 plus yards. You gotta be super long. There is credence to that. And when I dug back in to 2012, if you looked at the golfers who were top 30 on the full season in distance, their average strokes gained in the PGA Championship was a +1.
It was plus 0.5 for the top 30 most accurate golfers. So that's pretty substantial whenever you're looking at these razor thin margins. But strokes gained off the tee was 0.8, and you can gain strokes off the tee by being accurate and not being prohibitively short. And so I think that's really what I'm looking at is you have to gain strokes off the tee one way or the other.
Right. And I think that for me, I might be a little bit higher in distance than you are, just because like it is longer. The tour is longer now than it was then. It is just, it's a very long course. I feel like I do want to lean a bit into distance here. And I have off the tee and distance both on my sheet. Usually I try to narrow it down to one off the tee stat. I couldn't do that this week. I think that I don't want someone who is just long. I think that's the way I'd phrase it. If you're long but a sprayer, that's going to be a pretty tough sell. But also if you are good off the tee but not long, I kind of just want people who get both. That does narrow my list down, which is tough. But I think I'm okay being selective when there's so many good options in this field.
So I think for me, if you're not super long, you have to be pretty much hyper accurate, gaining strokes off the tee, but also gaining strokes with approach. So if you're accurate but not super long and your approach plays like bad, that's a cross off for me.
So like they need to check 2 out of 3 boxes. You need to gain off the tee, have distance, or have a great approach. Be great in 2 of those 3 areas, I think is kind of the way that I view it.
I think that's about right. Yeah. You never, ever, even on courses that reward accuracy, never just rank guys by accuracy. There's a lot more to it than that.
Indeed, there is. We're going to talk about golfers who were here back in 2012 in just 1 second. But first, the 2021 NBA Play-In Tournament. That said that weird. The Play-In Tournament is officially underway, and FanDuel and Netflix have teamed up to add another layer of excitement to the win or go home round. Introducing FanDuel's free NBA Play-In contest presented by Netflix's Army of the Dead, a free-to-play NBA contest spanning across all 4 nights of the Play-In Tournament. The contests are simple. All you have to do is build your best 9-player roster while staying under the salary cap and compete against other users in the contest for your shot at $25,000 in cash prizes. And as an added element, Netflix is providing an Army of the Dead bonus where if a lower-seeded team comes back from the dead and wins their matchup, all users who participated in the contest on that night receive a voucher to play in a paid NBA playoff contest and earn the right to take home the ultimate prize, a big payday, courtesy of Army of the Dead. The games tip off in just a few hours, so head to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app into the free NBA Play-In contest presented by Netflix's Army of the Dead today. And check out Army of the Dead, starring Dave Bautista, Ella Purnell, and Omari Hardwick, only on Netflix, May 21st. Eligibility restrictions apply.
What a better, you couldn't script this. We're talking Kiawah, we're talking distance, we're talking bombs, and we have Dave Bautista, whose finishing move was the Bautista bomb.
Oh, I thought he golfed on the side.
He might, and if he does, I guarantee you he hits bombs. But the Bautista bomb and Kiawah, I think, just go hand in hand.
Is that a wrestling thing? I know he's a wrestler, but
yes.
Okay.
This finishing move, Jim. I said that.
I only know him from Guardians of the Galaxy, so I'm not gonna. He was very good in that, so I'm in favor of Dave Bautista just for different reasons than
we were a pro Dave Bautista podcast. We got there from different paths,
correct?
But we're both,
He's a well-rounded guy. If we can get there via different paths, and the bombing angle is important as we talk about golfers who were here back in 2012, and I think that Brandon, we want to be skeptical of this because, like as mentioned, Rory was disgusting back in 2012. Let me read you some of his season-long ranks. He was second off the tee, 5th in distance. This is for the full year. 2nd in approach, 21st around the green, 33rd in scrambling, 40th in good drive rate. Just disgusting numbers. So you said he was at his peak, which is wild because I think he was 23 at the time. And you're right. You're right, but that's wild. But who else is here? Who else has knowledge of this course? So we can at least keep in our mind, even if we don't really care what they did necessarily back in 2012, because things are so different right now.
Yeah, I mean, we are pretty skeptical of course history as it is. Whenever you're looking at course history from 9 years ago, and also played in a different month. So like that's something that you just got to factor in. But I'm sure people will at least want to know who played here. I'm not going to read off every name, but some of the more notable golfers who are still somewhat relevant. What's noteworthy is, so long as my spreadsheet's right, only 3 golfers with a salary of $10,000 or higher on FanDuel played here in 2012. That's Rory, who won, Dustin Johnson, who was 48th, and then Webb Simpson, who did miss the cut. But we also had Justin Rose, Keegan Bradley, Ian Poulter tied for 3rd. Speaking of that, if you look at the nationalities of the players who finished really well, it's basically all non-Americans.
The undulations. Use that word, and there we go. That's the angle.
With Rory, Rose, Poulter, top 3. I think that's
Matthew Fitzpatrick, guaranteed winner this week.
I'm big on Fitzpatrick.
Okay, so, I'm not. We'll talk about that later.
Bubba Watson, that's because you're just factoring in distance. But Bubba Watson, Adam Scott were 11th. Louis Oosthuizen, Mark Leishman were top 30. Phil, I don't know if he makes the cut as relevant, but he's going to hit some bombs. Where they go, we don't know, but the bombs will be there. He was 36th. Gary Woodland, Dustin Johnson, Francesco Molinari, Cam Tringali made the cut. And then some other relevant names missed the cut but played here in case this is something that you're factoring in. Paul Casey, Webb Simpson, Jason Day, Sergio Garcia, Lee Westwood, Ryan Palmer, Matt Kuchar, Charlie Hoffman. There are others. There are other golfers who made the cut, but I'm not going to talk about them.
And I would say that some of those guys are interesting, and I'm not factoring this in. Like Paul Casey is very interesting. Obviously, he's a favorite, so like he's interesting. I think I might have Palmer. I don't know if Palmer's my player picks. I considered him at least, and Charlie Hoffman is someone who is interesting too. So I wouldn't overreact to what happened in 2012. I think the betting odds might be, but I wouldn't overreact to it. But it's nice to know they've seen the scores, especially given how long it is, given how difficult it is. I think that helps. I would not exclude anyone, obviously, based on that. And I would not actively target anyone based on that. But it is helpful to know who's been here.
Well, I'm having a hard time saying I'm not into Rory just because of what he did, and he's coming off the win. So like, that's the only case really where I'm factoring in the 2012 PGA Championship was just how good he was, and now he's coming off a win.
Well, I think the problem with that is, and we'll talk about Rory in current form, but like everyone else is accounting for that too. Yeah. Like if we're going to see someone run away from a popularity perspective, might be him or it might be Jordan Spieth. So let's talk about the current form heading into the PGA Championship. We're going to talk about those two guys first. You have Jordan Spieth. I have Rory. We'll talk about what they're doing right now, and then get an overall rundown of those two guys. I think if we're mapping out popularity, they're probably going to be the standouts for this week. So talking about Spieth, I'll talk about Rory, then we'll break down what could be the chalk this weekend.
Yeah, so Spieth's salary is only $11,400, which is, I think, noteworthy because of what he's doing. Again, on that ranks him 6th in the field, but he was 14-1. He's now 18-1. So that puts him tied for 4th with DJ behind Jon Rahm at 15-1 and Rory at 11. Spieth's back. Like, don't get me wrong. No matter what I say, Jordan Spieth is really good. Again, he might not be at his peak yet, but there's a lot to like. This isn't, the Spieth that we've had over the past, 2 years or so. He is 6th in Data Golf's true strokes gained approach over the past 3 months. He is 23rd in putting. He is 34th around the green, which is not a stat that we talked about. I think it's going to be vital this week around the green play. In the tournament, you're going to have to scramble. You're going to have to have control of your wedges. But I also don't want to make that like a primary stat because good wedge players who struggle elsewhere are not going to fare well. So that's good for Spieth. But where I start to worry is that and this is basically looking at, some of the most consistent, some of the most best golf on the PGA Tour. He's 57th off the tee in that sample. He is gaining strokes off the tee lately, but it's kind of marginal. It's just not, he's not racking up strokes off the tee. He is hitting more fairways. I think he's gained fairways on the field in 3 of his past 4. That's promising, but if you compare him to all the other studs, he's the only one who lacks in strokes gained off the tee. And he can overcome that if he hits the fairways and hits his irons as well as he has been doing. And then he has that short game that we know can kind of just, bring the magic with it. I think the lack of big, the chance that Spieth gains significant strokes off the tee is pretty low. And that is making me a little bit worried, especially when you factor in all the buzz, all the popularity. So I'm not sold on Jordan Spieth. I would be fine if he won, even if I don't have, I'm rooting for him.
Yeah.
But that's my problem with Spieth. So talk to me about Rory. We'll talk about some, popularity. We'll talk about the top of the field.
Yeah, so you talked about Rory at Kiawah back in 2012, but I think the more important aspect is the form because, again, it's 2012. He was a robot back then. So we want to look at what he's been doing recently. And helpfully, he won the Wells Fargo, as you know. And it wasn't due to, one thing. He was just good all around. He gained 5.3 in approach and 2.3 off the tee. He gained 6.9 putting. That's his third time in the past 4 measured events, gaining at least 2.5. So the putting for Rory has been good. Maybe that's not sustainable, but it's interesting given that he tends to occasionally have some blips there. The approach was fine for Rory, even when he had that little hiccup. He gained 0.4 in a miscut at the Players, 3.8 at the Arnold Palmer. So he just wasn't putting everything together all at once. He did that at the Wells Fargo, and he won. Rory has the distance. His approach can sometimes pop. So I feel like between the two, if I were to swallow the assumed chalk on one of these guys, I'd rather go Rory than Spieth. Because I think the concerns around Spieth are more glaring, is the way that I'd phrase that, because of what you said at the off the tee play. So I'd rather go Rory among the two potential chalk guys. What about you?
Yeah, certainly. Just because I am virtually guaranteed strokes gained off the tee from Rory. So what I'm struggling with Rory is that he did win the Wells Fargo, but it wasn't
he wasn't lights out tee to green.
It also was
tee to green.
He held off Keith Mitchell, who kind of just choked early in that final round. There wasn't a ton of pressure, it felt like, on Rory. I don't, we're objective. We try to be as objective as we can here, talk about the data. But, I think if Rory was 5th there, it would be there'd be less appeal, even though there'd still be plenty. So I do prefer Rory from a statistical standpoint over Jordan Spieth, but I'm most likely leaning toward not having either in my player pool for this week.
Yeah, I think I could see myself getting to Rory, and I would ideally like to. But realistically, I might not get there because I have guys who I am more likely to be aggressive with. There are enough guys where I'm okay, I need to make sure I get enough John Rahm. I need to make sure I get enough Tony Fino. I know it's different tiers, but it does matter when I'm talking about prioritization. So I think that because Rory's not going to be one of those guys I got to make sure I get there. I wouldn't be shocked if I omit him. I would say my default assumption is that I get to Rory. I would like to be underweight on him relative to the field, but I'd like to get there. I want some exposure to Rory. With Spieth, I'm okay not having any. And as you know, Brandon, people who've listened long enough know I don't outright fade people if I'm lower on them than the consensus. If I think they're a good play, I'll still use them. Mm-hmm. I just don't know if Spieth quite gets there because of the still questionable well-roundedness off the tee. So that's why, to me, I think that Rory, someone I'd like to get to, if I'm underweight, I'd like to get there. Spieth, I'm okay if I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to, with Spieth specifically, is what you think the driver is going to be. If he is just doing what he can to hit the fairway, and maybe even clubbing down in some spots where there aren't forced carries, is he going to hit the long irons well enough to make up for that? Are we going to see him kind of get kind of press and try to keep up with, I don't know who he's going to be paired with, anything like that. But, if he gets off the path and is hitting out of these fairway bunkers, it's going to be just enough to fall behind. So I still think that there's a lot of appeal in driving accuracy, but again, strokes gained off the tee is what I'm preferring, and that's just the one place where Spieth has not really been lighting it up. So again, more likely to play Rory, probably not even going to play him, but I'm rooting for Spieth even though I won't be heavily exposed.
I mean, I'll root for both. Like, I think that it's good stories. You want them to succeed. I just like Rory in general, so I'll root for him too. And Spieth, it's a good story as well. So I would root for both too, but definitely more likely to get to Rory than Spieth, and I would like to get to Rory. Don't care too much if I get to Spieth. Let's move on to some guys in the mid-range who have intriguing current form. One of them is Cameron Smith, and Cameron Smith is getting a lot of buzz this week. So it's kind of a similar discussion to what we had with Rory and with Spieth. So what do you see with Cameron Smith here at $9,900?
Yeah, Smith is actually second in tags on FanShare, which is not surprising. But I love Cam Smith. He's got great hat game. He's got the mullet. He's keeping it. I like Cam Smith, and he's just on a heater. So I think a lot of people probably feel the same way. He's finished top 17 in 5 straight stroke play events, with a 10th at the Masters, 9th at the RBC Heritage. Also in South Carolina, but is much more of an accuracy course than a distance course. But we know the current form is there. He's just not long off the tee. He's 29th percentile there. He has been getting longer in his career, going from an average of 284 yards per drive in his initial PGA Tour season to 297 this year. And he's showed up in majors, and that's something that I don't really look at course history a lot, but I think major performance at least tells us something. He has 6 top 25 finishes, 15 made cuts in 18 starts. I'm good with Cameron Smith. I'm actually good, and I will be doing this, but peppering the mid-range quite a lot. That's why I'm feeling okay not necessarily going hard at Rory. Mm-hmm. Does Smith do enough for you because you are factoring in distance so heavily?
Right. I think that's the key thing, is because if I'm going to go with Cameron Smith at $9,900 and kind of take my lumps off the tee, that means I'm not getting to Tony Feno. I know $500 is not a big difference, but it is a big difference. Sorry, it is a big difference, but I think that it's not a big enough gap between Smith and Finau, given what Finau is going to do for me from an off the tee perspective. If we're looking at guys who are not super long, like Webb is $600 more than Smith. If we're looking at guys directly in his salary tier, Paul Casey's $9,800. He has more giddy up off the tee. Obviously, they're kind of the opposite.
Would you want to do a Cam versus Casey head-to-head?
I would. I'd love to, actually. I think that sounds great.
That's tough because for
you root against Paul Casey.
Well, I mean, there's that, but Jim's 16-7 this year on podcast bets.
Don't talk about my bobble hat record, because that's
it's 12-8. You've been closing the gap. It was 11-8, but I got last week.
Ever since we made a friends mode, I think it's 7-6 in your favor. So
maybe that was maybe that's what you needed. So I have Cam Smith over Casey, FanDuel points.
Head-to-head FanDuel points, straight up. I think that's kind of the issue, is obviously Cam Smith, probably really good top 10 odds because he's such a good golfer, but I want the guys who I can feel better about winning this event, and I think I need more distance to feel good about that. So I get where you're coming from, but I'm okay being underweight on him, especially given that he's tracking to be very popular.
Yeah, I think he's going to be popular. I think it's for good reason, though, so it's probably good chalk, but it is also the off the tee play is not flawless. We're looking at that distance being, not amazing. I have him 41st percentile off the tee over the past year, which is adjusted for fields he's played in recency. Spieth's 21st, by the way. But I don't want to get overconfident with Cam Smith.
Yeah. Which is why you bet him head-to-head versus Paul Casey. What could go wrong with Paul Casey? He's never let me down before. Let's talk about Sam Burns, because he's a guy who does have distance and almost got me a win pick last week. Couldn't quite get there. I'm okay rooting for Cagely, though, so that was fun. Either way, I think that Burns could be a focal point this week with his salary just $9,400. Burns, runner-up last week, and could have won had he just putted a bit better. Gained 0.5 on the greens, but gained 11.8 tee to green, including 5.6 in approach. Burns has now gained 9.3 strokes in approach in the past 2 events combined. He's gained 5.9 off the tee, 4.2 around the green. Now, with most tee check guys, I'd be like, oh, well, don't count on the putting. But like with Burns, you actually can. He's a good putter. We know he has distance too, ranks 24th there the past 50 rounds. The big issue is I worry that he might be popular coming off back-to-back top 2 finishes. He is not popping from a fan share perspective right now. So asking me Tuesday morning, I feel less worried than I was Monday afternoon about Sam Burns being popular. But I think he's great for cash games. I maybe I'm wrong there. I think he's great for cash games. I'm going to get there in tournaments too. I think that Sam Burns, to me, if we're looking for guys who are undersalaried relative to where they should be, Sam Burns probably checks that. I will say, though, that Burns has benefited at times from playing in lesser fields. Once you adjust for the fields he's been in, he doesn't look as much of a mis-salaried golfer as he does overall. But despite that, I still think that Burns is someone at 94 where those concerns are lessened for me because he's pretty cheap. What are your thoughts on Sam Burns this week?
Yeah, I like him. He's got the distance, got the putting. I actually mentioned this, I don't know if it was last week or just in recent weeks, but like he has the profile to be a threat at a lot of different courses because he's so long and he's a good putter as well. That's kind of a rare combination. But if you can gain strokes off the tee, which is the most predictable stat of the 4, and you can putt at a high baseline, and then you factor in like that range from your baseline, like it's no surprise that he is doing what he's doing. The irons are really good right now too. My only concern with Burns isn't even popularity because I don't anticipate that he will be prohibitively popular. Like last year, for example, at the PGA, there was Justin Thomas at 37%, Brooks was 31, Xander 28, Berger 25, Cantlay 21, and no value plays were rostered on at least 20% of lineups. 20% is still pretty high. Like Fitzpatrick was 19%, but you can make that work so long as you're different elsewhere. But my main concern with Burns is that his around the green play is not very good. Mm-hmm. And this is why I don't like to, I mean, I love to watch golf, but when you watch golf and you say, this is why I'm going to play this guy or not play this guy, he hit a chip that like didn't make it over the ridge on this one. And it like trickled down and he left himself with like 40 feet or something. I'm like, yeah. And he's not, the stats say he's not good around the green. So this is why he's going to struggle at Kiawah. It's like, that's silly, but the long-term data does say that his wedges aren't, right, dialed in. So that's the one concern with Burns. He's not flawless.
Yeah. But he's $9,400. So who is? So I think that's why I'm here. Burns, I think, will be a staple for me. I think that despite the around the green play, I'd still be willing to label him as a cash game play. Would you?
Yes. What I was really getting at is,
don't get too overconfident.
Don't be like, oh, well, Sam Burns, 9,400, 80% of lineups because there's nothing to worry about. That's out. It's like, no, the wedges are a concern, so don't go overboard. That's what I was getting at. But cash game play, I think, pretty much a guarantee for me at this point to be in our bobble hat lineup against each other.
Yeah, I think that
5v5.
Yeah, it's a 5v5, so that's fine. Let's talk here about a guy who does not currently have a salary on FanDuel. That is Garrick Higgo, and again, no salary. But if you look at his FanDuel odds, he is 110-1 to win this event. So we don't know what his salary will be. But I think, Brandon, because we're talking here Tuesday morning, we know he'll be out of the player pool at some point. So when you're looking at this guy and the profile he has, is he someone you are willing to target? And what salary do you think is appropriate for him for this week?
Yeah, so this is kind of like a projection, but Higgo is kind of all the rage on the European tour. And I think it's at least worth mentioning because we don't know what he's going to come in at. And if he is, like, we'll talk about where he might need to be, but let's just talk about what we know about Higgo. He's won 2 of his past 3 starts on the European tour. He has 7 top 20 finishes in his past 8. That's pretty wild. But the European Tour, and it's something I talked about on my Q&A, I think 2 weeks ago or something, but the European Tour is about as tough as the Korn Ferry Tour. So keep that in mind. If you convert his like 4 top 8 finishes to PGA Tour events in the same week, one of them was during this Zurich, so I just made it, I think the Wells Fargo or something, but he would be entering with a 33rd, 4th, 18th, and 3rd, which is not bad, but it's definitely not quite as good as 2 wins in his last 3 and 4 top 8. So adding in that context, that is, worth considering. So I think he's going to get a lot of buzz once he is added to the player pool. He is plus 110 to win on FanDuel Sportsbook at the moment. He is 17th in Data Golf's adjusted strokes gained or true strokes gained over the past 30 days, which if he comes in at a value salary, you say 17th, that's appealing. But he's 2nd in putting, 58th off the tee, 88th in approach, 83rd tee to green. So I thought it was at least, because we're not going to be able to talk about him any other way, I thought it was at least interesting to talk about him here. We're going to see a lot of European Tour names coming over here for the PGA. So check out Data Golf, but just don't get overconfident. I think for me, let me see what I have him at. And I can kind of throw out a general salary.
Okay.
Let me see where he is for me, because he's not particularly, he's like, he's about like world average for me in my data. So, I mean, we see this is over the past year. I would say like he should be around 85, like Cam Champ is. Okay. But they're very different golfers.
If you're looking at Data Golf's true strokes gained over the past, I'm doing 6 months here. I want to give you similar names in the same range. And this is obviously like, this is just one thing, but like Phil Mickelson's there. Jason Duffner's there. Ricky Fowler's there. Harry Higgs, he's behind Sebastian Munoz. And Munoz has been in a downturn in this time. So I think that's probably underrating Munoz a bit. So I would kind of view him in a similar vein to them. He's had a Cameron Champ, but that's 6 months. That's not a big sample on Champ. So I think keep those names in mind. And I think
this is a good check, like gut check though, for every major. Whenever there are these like names that you think like, oh, dude, no, this guy's like killing it on the European Tour. It's like it's actually just the Korn Ferry Tour basically, and like you're not going. If he comes out in like the mid 9,000s, it's pretty easy, especially with how his game shapes up with the putting.
Right.
So I just this is a good advice for all majors moving, and just actually any event where you kind of see this going forward.
I would say, from an odds perspective, he's probably going to wind up like if they do a good job of meshing like odds to salary. I would guess he's probably high 8,000s, and I don't want that, so I'm okay avoiding that.
Yeah, at 110.
Yeah,
the average of the guys at 110 is about 9,100. So
we were talking about Higgo and talking about accounting for the field season. So let's talk about Charlie Hoffman, who had a good finish at the Corrales Punta Cana.
Yeah.
I'm sure this is very predictive. Let's talk about Charlie Hoffman, because we talked a lot about him entering the Masters. He didn't wind up qualifying, but since then he's kept up the hot play that got us talking about him leading into the Masters. Hoffman has been to 10 events since January 1st. One missed cut in there. That was at the Waste Management. But outside of that, he has 7 top 20 finishes, similar to what we were talking about before with Higgo as well. And Hoffman's getting there via his irons. He has gained at least 4.8 on approach 6 separate times in those 10 events. He has also gained at least 2 off the tee 4 times. He has a length. He ranks 11th in distance, 19th in strokes gained off the tee, 9th in approach. He's not a terrible putter. So Hoffman's $8,600. He doesn't carry win equity at 220 to 1. He's double the odds of Higgo, but I think Hoffman's still viable as a value play. Am I off in that, Brandon? What's your on Charlie Hoffman this week?
Well, you mentioned the Corrales jokingly, but those do have past Palom greens, so there's your angle for Hoffman.
He finished 34th, so 34th at the Corrales Punta Cana probably translates to like 15th at the PGA Championship, right?
Yeah, I think that's how that goes.
Math.
Yeah, I mean, Hoffman's like pretty solid long term. The irons have been good. I have him in the 87th percentile over the past year when adjusted for field strength and recency. The chipping is pretty poor at 28th percentile, but very nice putting splits, 69th percentile, 85th in bogey avoidance, and did play here in 2012, missed the cut. That's not going to be predictive, but who I've played and, kind of have some idea. I wouldn't be against Hoffman, but I haven't really gotten there myself.
Yeah. I will. Would you want to do a Higgo versus Hoffman head-to-head or no?
I don't want any part of a guy who's just putting his way to win.
Odds are twice as long. Or his odds are twice as long. I'm giving you a gift, and you are refusing to take it. Don't blame me when you're 16-7 or 7-16 in win bets. I gave you a gift, and you said no. So
let me see. I have Hoffman.
Hoffman's like plus 1.19 strokes above average the past 6 months.
Yeah,
based on Data Golf's numbers.
Yeah, no, I'm not that. Jim, get out of here with that.
I tried. Can't say I didn't try. Let's take a look at what the bookmakers are saying for this week. Rory Mcilroy, the definitive favorite at 11-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. There's a big dip down to Jon Rahm. He is 15-1. Justin Thomas is 16-1. Dustin Johnson and Jordan Spieth are right behind 18-1. Bryson D Chambeau, 19-1, followed by Xander Schauffele at 20-1. Victor Hovland is 22-1. Then there is a little teardrop down to Collin Morikawa and Daniel Berger. They are both 30-1. Hideki Matsuyama, fresh off the Masters win, is 33-1. Patrick Reed rounds out the top group at 36-1. We have not talked roster construction yet, so let's do that right now. You did a little bit with Rory, but let's talk about it now. We talk often in majors about how balanced approaches have more credence because when we're dipping down to the mid-10,000s, we're using really good golfers. What is your read on that for this week? Are you thinking it's a similar type of setup where you want to go balanced as a result of the quality of the field?
Yeah, more balanced than top and bottom heavy. Now we do have some good golfers with lower-ish salaries in the low 9,000 range, the upper 8,000 range, but realistically, we're looking at a higher portion of our overall salary going to the optimal lineups in tough fields. It's about 58,000, whereas in weak fields, it's under 55,000, which means a lot more variance. And the higher salary golfers in weaker fields probably aren't really worth it. And then we have more moving room, I don't know, just for the lower salary golfers to outperform their salaries, probably what I should say. Mm-hmm. In tough fields, we don't see that as much. So for me, I'm going to be much more balanced than I'm already generally building balanced lineups as it is, but definitely looking for balanced builds. And I think the real takeaway from the study that I've done on this is in tough fields, it's okay to fade the chalk because you're going to have a whole lot of options to pivot to.
Yeah. And I think that's probably easier this week, given that we're not super enamored with all of the potential chalk. If I understand why a golfer is chalk, I am comfortable going overweight. But when I have really good alternatives, that's the prime situation to pivot. If you have ways to poke holes in those golfers and you have opportunities to pivot, just do it. So to me, that kind of continues the discussion we had about Cameron Smith before, continues the conversation about Jordan Spieth, where we have good alternatives right in the same salary tier as those guys. I'm going to go there over using them, but I'll also going back to the conversation about balance. I think this is a great week to go balanced, and we don't always agree on that. I am more prone to going top heavy than you are. This week, I won't be doing that. I think this week is a good week to shoot for some balance, load up on guys with semi-realistic paths to victory, and go that route rather than loading up and making sure you jam in all the top guys. I'm not saying I'm passing up all of, Rory, Rahm, Bryson, Dustin, all those guys, But like if I do go with a Dustin Johnson, I'm probably dipping down to the 10,000 for my second golfer. That's probably the way that I view it. So like DJ plus balance, Bryson plus balance, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that one thing I would say, you mentioned if you see a red flag and have pivots, like pivot, that's definitely the case. I don't even really need to see the red flags this week because a lot of the golfers at the top don't really have them. Spieth's only red flag is like if he drives it as he has been long term, like that's a red flag. If he's hitting fairways, it's not quite so much a red flag, which is what he's been doing recently. It's just more that the red flag is that it's golf and it's highly volatile. And in fields with, I pulled 109 perfect lineups, optimal lineups from FanDuel contests, and in difficult fields with the official World Golf Rankings, field strength of 550 or greater. This week it's 916, so it's definitely tough. The most popular golfer, average of 11,650, finished outside the top 25 in FanDuel points 61% of the time. Mm-hmm. So that's all I need for. Look, I love Cam Smith. I think he's a good process play. If I think he's going to be on 35% of lineups, I just can't really get in on him because I have other options.
I'd probably take the under on 35, but I think he'll be 25 at least, and that's enough when I have good alternatives and reasons to poke holes. So to me, I think it's a good week to identify the chalk, pivot from it if you have good alternatives or if you have red flags, or like Brandon said, even if you don't have those things, and then go for balance this week. Which golfers' odds have moved the most since, I mean, they've opened a while ago, but like recently, which golfers have been getting action or haven't been getting action recently based on what you're seeing?
Yeah, so as of like, I think these are from either Sunday night or Monday morning, my initial ones. I've been pulling a lot, so I know like what's reasonable, but Daniel Berger shortened. This is a big one, 41-30. Like Daniel Berger a lot this week. Mm-hmm. Abraham Answer 50-47, and Siwoo Kim 100-90. Those are the only golfers whose odds have shortened more than like one. I think Feno went from 41-40, but I didn't really want to mention him. And now that I did, I feel like it was a waste of time.
What? Feno's never a waste of time. How dare you?
Golfers whose odds have lengthened. There's just about everyone because everyone sort of opened or was this weekend shorter and then they kind of fell off. But some notable ones, Jordan Spieth was 12-1, was 14 then, and now he's 18. So I think that's noteworthy. Dustin Johnson, 14-18. Bryson, 14-19. Brooks Koepka was pretty much the biggest one, 27-45. Patrick Cantlay, also significant, 33-45. Webb Simpson, 33-42. Tommy Fleetwood, 41-55. Joaquin Neiman, 50-65. Sam Burns, 50-70. Sungjae Im, 50-80. And then some major winners in this list. Jason Day, Sergio Garcia, Adam Scott, Bubba Watson from 65 to 100 plus. Two of them are 110. I don't know who, but you know.
I want to ask you about DJ and Brooks, because obviously if they were fully healthy, I feel like we'd be there this week because they got the distance. They're great off the tee, but neither guy's fully healthy. Brooks has like a robo kneecap. DJ had to withdraw last week, potentially because like this is his home state, trying to, look towards this, trying to gear up for this course. But like, it's a red flag for sure when someone withdraws. So how are you feeling about Koepka and DJ specifically, knowing that they would be good process plays, but there are injury red flags for both guys?
So I'm out on Brooks. Yep. I think that there's a lot to worry about with him. He can't even really like bend down to read greens. I think that's an issue. I'm not sold that DJ is actually that hurt. He's actually my win pick. I give out win picks to a few different places. He's my win pick at the top. I think he's the most interesting. We saw him doing backflips off of his boat.
Again, it's not a boat. Stop calling it a boat. Yeah. It could be like a fishing vessel, like one of those like rowboats. It'd be a yacht because Dustin Johnson owns it.
Yeah. I think he sets up really well from a game theory standpoint. It is a little bit concerning to build a lineup around someone who cited knee discomfort again, I don't know how injured he is. I haven't really gotten much of an indication. I know the form has been trending down a little bit, but if you really look at it, it's the putter has gone cold, and that's not something that we should worry about. Recent major winners have not necessarily been in great putting form entering. They've been in good, tee to green form. DJ is from South Carolina. He grew up, or was born at least 2.5 hours from this course. Cited it as one of his favorites. Plays Pete Dye courses really well. Plays Carolina courses really well. I think DJ is the most intriguing play above 11,000 in the field this week.
I think he's very interesting. He's not my favorite guy above there, but I think that he's top 2, I would say, behind one other guy who we'll talk about in the player picks. But he's interesting for sure. I'm on board with you. You might be a tiny bit higher, but I'm on board with overlooking the knee concerns with DJ and being high on him. Which lower salaried golfers have odds stand out to you based on the odds at FanDuel Sportsbook?
This is what this section of the show was really made for, was Major Week, because we get Scotty Sheffler at 48 to 1. He's 9,500. Corey Connors 60 to 1, 9,300. Mark Leishman, Sam Burns 70 to 1, and Shane Lowry is 75 to 1. He's 9,100. So, not full on value plays there, but those are some pretty solid win odds for reasonable salaries. You can play them all on a balanced build and feel pretty good about all 60 of your golfers. I'm a little bit lower on Lowry, but he's actually been, he's intriguing. I'll say that much. But if we go below 9,000, we have Keegan Bradley, 80 to 1, Brian Harmon, 90 to 1, Matt Wallace, 95, Bubba Watson, Charles Schwartzel, 100 to 1.
So Sam Burns lengthened, but that's because his odds were very short. I would not view it as being a red flag. He's still, if you compare odds to salary, he's still undervalued and he still fits the course well. So
go ahead. Well, he also was the 54-hole leader last week. Didn't win.
Lowered him to get in front of it, basically.
I think they were, bracing for a back-to-back winner entering.
That would be tough. Yes. Tough. They would get a lot of liability on Sam Burns if that happened. Weather for this week, like I said, does not look bad. The wind speeds are pretty steady between 10 and 12 miles per hour the entire day Thursday. Friday, pretty solid too. They start off around 7 or 8 miles per hour, never get higher than 10. And that wind is lower than expected. So I kind of went into this expecting that I might need to put wind splits on my sheet. I will not. I think that we're okay without that here. The windiest day is Sunday, and even then, wind speeds never get higher than 15 miles per hour. So I went going in assuming that I'd have to put wind splits in my sheet. I'm not. I think it's fine to play things pretty straight up for this week. And with that in mind, let's talk about our player picks here for the PGA Championship based on the salaries at FanDuel.com. Brandon, who stands out to you in the upper tier for this week?
I think that Dustin Johnson is the best tournament play above 11,000. I think the best cash game play is Xander Schauffele at 11,300. I know I've never talked about Xander before, but I'm building balanced lineups this week. I will tell you this much. I am unless something really changes, I'm going to be playing Xander as my highest salary golfer against you in our head to head. There's just there's nothing you can look at with Xander and be worried about from a high floor standpoint. The ceiling, okay, maybe he doesn't have what it takes to win a major, which I think is not the case. But from a floor standpoint, from a safety standpoint, I think it's really hard to make a case against Xander. My data has Xander as the best golfer in the world over the past year when you adjust for recency and field strength. Data Golf also has them. Number one has him, I think, tied for number one, but that's substantial.
He's 0.01 better than DJ. He's out in front.
That's what it was. So he does everything well. He drives the ball long. He drives it pretty straight. He hits irons really well. He's got a good short game. He is the best bogey avoider in the field. He plays majors really well, which isn't a surprise to anyone. 15 career major starts, 2 runners up, 8 top 10s, 11 top 25s. like you can't really build me a better high floor case for someone who has gone on record and saying, I like to play tough courses. I like tough fields. It's what brings out the best in me. I think Xander's like obviously not a lock for a top 10, but you know, you can't really point to anything against Xander this week.
Have you bet him yet?
No, I was hoping to see if he would trend down from 20.
Okay. So you have Xander number 1. I have a guy I don't think we've talked about at all yet, Bryson D Chambeau. And I assumed Bryson would be getting more buzz this week given the distance angle, but he really hasn't. And his salary is very reasonable at $11,600. I'm going to take that here. The distance should be a legit advantage this week. He ranks second in distance and first in strokes gained off the tee over the past 50 rounds. And as you always mention, he's a good putter too. So long distance, good putter. The approach play is inconsistent. That's why he ranks low from an approach perspective, but he can have pop weeks there too. He gained 5.1 at the Players, 4.2 at the Arnold Palmer, and if he gets that, he'll win. Like that's, I don't know, like that might be too definitive, but like if he gets the approach play he had at the Players and the Arnold Palmer, he might win. So even when he lost 5.5 in approach at the Wells Fargo, he still finished 9th because of how good everything else is. So I have a really hard time not loading up on Bryson at 11.6. I mentioned that there was one guy outside of DJ I had more interest in above $11,000. That guy is Bryson D Chambeau. I am scrolling, and he is 19th in fan share tags. I think Bryson's great.
Yeah, like I said at the top of the show, it's really hard to make a case against anyone at the top of the field. For Bryson, like he's a good scrambler, even though it feels like you know what happened with the wedges sometimes. And the scrambling isn't necessarily just around the green; it's just getting up and down for par. But like I don't have a whole lot to say against Bryson. It's just the iron play, but I need to find a way to figure out how many strokes he can actually gain, because strokes gain approach is like the amount of strokes you gain from your approach shots, which is obvious. But if you're gaining extra off the tee or just naturally reducing the amount you can gain from approach, I want to see like the percentage of approach shots where he gains strokes. Like,
because there's a finite number of strokes he can gain on approach if he's gaining 16 off the tee.
Yeah. So this is like the one time where I would actually consider looking at, well, I mean, it's not like I've never looked at this or actively choose not to, but strokes gained ball striking, just like combine the two. I think it's misleading for some because we prefer approach in most cases, and I don't want to roster golfers with bad approach play who are just great off the tee. But, I was looking at Bryson. I don't really have a case against him. If I'm really trying to come up with something, they're going to use rangefinders this week. I don't know if I can't imagine. I'm assuming he's going to use one because he wants all that data, but I don't know if that's going to mess with his process at all.
Like short circuit.
I don't know. It just, maybe it's that like other golfers will have some of that advantage. It's supposed to speed up play and maybe it does, but that's kind of, I'm grasping at straws for reasons not to like Bryson. That's one that comes to mind, but that's not something that I'm going to factor in. But I am probably not going to play Bryson just because I prefer other golfers in the 11K range.
He'll be a win pick for me this week. You can write that down now. Who else do you like in this upper range?
Well, I'm going to talk about Daniel Berger, but it's a little risky to go this whole show and not even mention Victor Hovland, basically. He's going to be really popular, I think, with his form being what it is at 11,000. So just at least want to mention him. I think he's a good process play, but if he's chalky, limit that for tournaments. But I'm going to go with Daniel Berger at 10-3. I think Berger is just undersalaried for how good he is. He's basically Xander. Really not that different in terms of the stats. I have him as the best stats and form-based value in the 10,000 range based on my model. And like with Xander, there's just no holes in his game, which is why we talk about him all the time. I think he could be in the running for my most exposed golfer. That like I just have him on the most lineups. He's top 30 in strokes gained average on Pete Dye courses, difficult courses, Carolina courses, and long Bermuda courses, according to Fantasy National. Those are kind of some big angles there if you're looking at it. 92nd percentile adjusted strokes gained tee to green, and this is very nice, 69th percentile in both distance gained and Bermuda putting. Again, I know these greens aren't Bermuda, they're past Palin, but I'm playing like the grainy angle here.
I think Berger's great. I think that he fits really well with a balanced build. And I would love to have a lineup where I start Bryson, Berger, and Tony Finau. So let's talk about Tony Finau as my second player pick in the upper range. He's 10-4, Berger's 10-3, so I'd go Berger straight up. But like Finau is also someone I want to get to. It's a Porque no los dos situation. I'd rather just take both. Finau has missed 3 of his past 4 cuts, which ain't great. I think that's just kind of making him undersalaried here at 10-4. In one of the missed cuts, Finau gained 3.4 in approach and 2.8 around the green. He just struggled off the tee. You don't expect that from Tony Finau, and he was fine off the tee in the other 2 missed cuts. If you look between the missed cuts, he finished 10th, and that 10th place finish came at Augusta, another place that requires a well-rounded game where you want distance and putting. Finau did that, ranks 12th in the field in distance, 24th in strokes gained off the tee, 10th in approach, and to me, that's worth a lot more than 10-4. So, and the putting's also not as, I would say it's not as bad as perception. Like you look at the data golf's numbers, he's above average as a putter over the past year. So like he's fine. He's not a standout like other guys. So I think that to me, a lineup of Bryson, Finau, Berger is really fun. And I'd like to get there. I think like my default build this week might be stud, 2 in the 10,000 range, and then go from there. I think that grades out really well for me.
I mean,
what are your thoughts on Tony Finau? Sorry, forgot to ask.
I mean, I wouldn't have known what to say or do otherwise. No, I think that's a good approach for your lineup. His missed cuts have come at the Players when
accuracy.
The Players is super volatile. The Valero and the Wells Fargo, but like he barely lost strokes. He might have missed all his cuts on the number. I don't know based on the data. I don't look at like that. I just have the strokes gain stuff, but they weren't like wildly poor missed cuts. And Finau's so good in majors, which is something that you have to kind of consider. 16 made cuts in 19 tries, 11 top 25s, 4 top 5s. Like, I don't really see a reason to be worried about Finau. The missed cuts don't worry me. It's not. I actually had someone ask me leading into the Masters on the Q&A, what about Tony Finau coming off 2 missed cuts? Like, that's not that predictive. And he went out and finished 10th. So I'm in on Finau as well.
All right, let's move down to the mid-range. Who stands out to you there between like $9,000 and $10,000?
I'm going to go with Matt Fitzpatrick. 9,900. It was kind of a coin flip between Fitz and Cam Smith, that is, but with the popularity discrepancy almost guaranteed, I'm going to go with Fitzpatrick here. His main blemish is a lack of distance. He's in the 12th percentile, but he's so accurate that he gains strokes off the tee anyway. I have him in the 84th percentile and adjusted strokes gained off the tee over the past year. I don't know exactly how well this course is going to play compared to 2012, but shorter hitters who were good elsewhere were able to figure it out. That's kind of the angle I'm playing. He's an amazing Bermuda putter, 99th percentile. And kind of by far over the past year, Fitz is the best long-term golfer with a salary below $10,000. So I like that. Fitzpatrick is 16th in strokes gained average on difficult PGA courses, 27th at Pete Dye courses, 26th at Carolina courses over the past 50 rounds. I think he checks, a lot of those boxes we're looking for. The only thing he lacks is distance, which I do think he can overcome.
Yeah, I think that it goes back to what we said before, where you need to check 2 out of 3. And he does check 2 out of 3. That's not enough for me to... I'm not going to get to Fitzpatrick personally. I get why you will. I think that your argument makes sense, but I'm just playing a different angle this week. I want to lean into building assumption lines, building around the distance angle, and that leads me to Paul Casey as being my top option in the mid-range. $9,800 doesn't generally get brought up in the distance discussion, but Casey is long. He ranks 19th in distance and 28th in strokes gained off the tee. that should help him plenty this week. He is also 12th in approach. Casey is going to gain strokes via ball striking this week. We just have to hope that he doesn't give it back on the greens, which is not a concern with Fitzpatrick, but it is with Casey. He is 101st in total putting the past 100 rounds. $9,800. I think that he fits well with the balanced build. I'd like to get there. What are your thoughts on Paul Casey for this week?
I think he's fine. I think I just prefer Fitzpatrick and Cam Smith to him. It's always it's so hard to get in on Casey because the putting is not good. Mm-hmm. The wedge play at times can be bad. So we're looking at one of the best ball strikers in the world with a short game that can kind of let you down. I think you're going to need to have the wedges sort of dialed in this week. So for that reason, I'm a little bit lower on Casey, but I don't think that I would talk you out of playing him.
You're not going to anyway, so don't bother. Let's move on to our other mid-range plays. Who else stands out to you here?
Speaking of someone with not great wedge play, but amazing ball striking, is Joaquin Neiman. Yeah, you want to talk about someone who doesn't necessarily get talked about when it comes to distance? Neiman's 8th in driving distance on the season. It's 97th percentile over the past 100 rounds, according to Fantasy National. He's one of his resolutions last year was to get stronger abs, which I think he's probably accomplished based on what we've seen. But he gains an average of 1.3 strokes on...
What do you mean based on what we've seen? Do abs show up in the data golf data? Or is it just the distance?
No, the distance, man.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant his abs were just showing up. Instead of plus 1.3 strokes gained is plus abs.
He might have gained plus 1.3 abs.
Check back. Let's talk to Joaquin. Text him in your little group chat and see what the ab situation is.
All right, I'll do that.
Okay.
Just after I talk about the case for Neiman at 9,600 here. Gains 1.3 strokes on the field on long Bermuda tracks, 1.2 on Carolina courses over the past 50 rounds, some of the best marks in the field. We know the ball striking's there, 90th percentile or better in both adjusted strokes gained, off the tee and approach. Gotta like that. Only 4 golfers in the field can say that they rank 90th percentile or better in both of those ball striking stats. The others are Dustin Johnson, Victor Hovland, and Corey Connors. So I'm in on all those guys, frankly, to some degree. I know we kind of glossed over Hovland, but it's more of a popularity thing. I think Neiman's a really good play. I
agree. I think that he is a cash gain consideration. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah.
Okay, so we both like Neiman a lot. I also like Scotty Sheffler, who's $9,500. Scheffler has some issues in this game right now, especially on approach, but I just don't want to overthink it and ignore him here at $9,500, especially if we assume that, probably won't be that popular because he has had some issues recently. Scheffler ranks just 93rd in approach the past 50 rounds. That's rough, but it hasn't all been bad. He gained 2.9 at the Valspar, 3.45 at the Genesis, 3.9 at the WGC Workday, and he's been good everywhere else except the putting. Even there, he's generally not losing a bunch in the greens. He's not gaining. He did gain 5 points at the Waste Management, 3.3 at the WGC Workday, so he can gain, which is something you talk about as being, can you gain strokes in the greens? Because you need that to win, and Scheffler can. He's just not consistently doing it. He might not have the best floor because of the irons, and that's why I brought up Neiman as a cash game play. I'd rather go Neiman in cash over Scheffler. But for tournaments, I think Scheffler's really fun. I like the longer-term data on Scheffler. I think he's a value at the salary. Brandon, what are your thoughts on Scotty Sheffler this week?
Yeah, I like Scheffler. It's one of those spots where you're looking at someone who we would normally be liking, but because there are, some concerns and then other golfers don't have those more hyper recent concerns, we're forgetting about Scotty Sheffler. Not saying that we are because we both like him, but it's, these are the types of things that you kind of have to look for. Who's getting forgotten about and does it make sense? But I think he should fit Kiawah well. His around the green play has really improved. He's now 73rd percentile over the past year when adjusting for field strength. We know he's long. We know that he isn't really afraid of tough fields. Made 4 straight cuts at majors, was 4th at Harding Park last year. and consecutive top fives in WGC events. So I'm in on Sheffler. I think he's a good play this week, and just another golfer who fits a balanced lineup if we want to go that route.
I just want to pepper this range. I think, again, we're talking about that one bill before with like a one stud in the 11,000 range, two in the 10,000 range, probably getting two more in the 9,000 range, and then one guy below 9,000. I think that's my optimal build for this week. Speaking of the 8,000 range, let's go down there and finish up with our value plays for this week at the PGA Championship. Brandon, who stands out to you in this 8,000 range?
Gary Woodland for me, former major winner, 22nd in strokes gained at Carolina courses over the past 50 rounds, 11th at long Bermuda / Pass Palom courses, 15th at difficult courses. He's starting to figure things out again after his U.S. Open win in 2019, primarily with the ball striking, and which is what we want to see. He's gained strokes off the tee when you adjust for field strength in 5 of his past 6 measured events, and from approach in 7 of the past 9. He has lost more than 0.6 adjusted approach shots in just 1 of those past 9. He did play here in 2012, finishing 42nd. So I think Woodland's trending back up. I think the salary is very, very appealing. He's going to be sort of one of the low end guys that I'm very heavy on.
I like Woodland too. I'm okay with getting there. I prefer Bubba Watson. So let's talk about him. Kind of cheating. He's 9,000. I said below 9,000, but whatever. It's our podcast, our rules. If we're leaning into the distance angle, might as well go all in. Bubba can still bang it. He ranks 33rd in the field in distance and 6th in strokes gained off the tee the past 50 rounds. There have been some hiccups in the approach play recently, but still ranked 45th there. That's good enough to get by. And the approach was really, really good over the fall. So that's not that long ago. If he can tap back into that, if he can get that approach play that he had in the fall back, he would have the upside to snag a top 10 finish here. He's gotten good finishes recently despite the inconsistent irons, and I think that gives Watson the path to a ceiling. I'll buy in here, hoping that the approach play comes back, and I think that Bubba makes sense at 9,000. What are your thoughts on Bubba Watson for this week?
He's my favorite play at 9,000 or below. Okay. 96 percentile adjusted strokes gained off the tee, 71st in approach. We know he's long off the tee, so that's not really an issue. The short game is kind of the thing that's always, like, if it's there, it's going to be a good week for Bubba. If it's not, it's going to be kind of a bad week for Bubba. But he's 30th in strokes gained on Pete Dye courses, 18th on longer Bermuda courses. So he's got like the ball striking stats and some of these angles that I'm kind of looking at for this week.
So Bubba Watson, our favorite play below or at $9,000 or lower. Who else stands out to you, Brandon, here in this the value range?
I do think it starts to drop off here after Woodland and Bubba, but Cam Tringali, 8,600. We love Cam Tringali on the podcast. 73rd percentile in adjusted strokes gained tee to green over the past year. Avoids bogey as well, 95th percentile in bogey avoidance. Kind of long, 72nd percentile. Good putter on Bermuda. Has not lost strokes gained tee to green. Lost strokes tee to green, I should probably say, in 13 straight events. I think Kiawah could set up well for him, just based on the fact that he kind of does everything fairly well. Played here in 2012. Made the cut, but was 72nd. So I'm not going to factor that in against him, but I think he's in pretty solid form.
So you were talking about how Berger is Xander Schauffele light. Is Cam Tringali like the light version of Daniel Berger?
Sure.
Okay.
I actually kind of want to build out like similarity scores and see kind of who's kind of do some arbitrage stuff from that angle.
Okay. Also, Tringali was 24, I think, back in 2012, so wouldn't worry too much about the poor finish there. I think Tringali works out well too. My preferred guy, though, is Jason Kokrak. We're back on our boy. He's likely going to thump it. He's likely going to gain off the tee. Does enough elsewhere to make that look pretty fun. Kokrak ranks 21st in distance and 13th in strokes gained off the tee. He's gained at least 3 off the tee in 4 straight measured events and in 4 of the past 5. And the approach has been there too. He gained 4.6 at the Players, 3.2 at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, 5.3 at the Sony. Ranks 47th in approach overall and is 49th in all-around putting. Kokrak grades out really well, even after you account for the fields he's playing in. So for $8,700, I think he makes a little bit too much sense for me to ignore. I'd also say I like Ryan Palmer, Cameron Davis, Charlie Hoffman down here. So there is a fall off, but I think that those guys are all at least interesting to me. What are your thoughts on Kokrak?
So I have a thing where I do like a stats rating and just my long-term adjusted.
He's got to be number one in stats only in the entire field.
He's not.
Oh, well.
I think Xander's top in both, actually. But if I combine that score and compare it to salary, Kokrak's second in value in that regard behind Russell Henley, which makes sense, but I'm not going to play Henley at 8,200 just because he's not long off the tee. But I think Kokrak's one of the better plays down here. I think having Woodland, Bubba, Tringali, Kokrak, some of the guys just above 9,000. We have a lot of ways to build balanced lineups or even top heavy lineups without like that modified, as you're talking about, one stud, and then you kind of don't really dip below kind of 85, 86. I think that's the right play this week.
I don't dip below 87, which is the salary that Jason Kokrak is at.
No Cam Tringali for you? No Emiliano Grillo for you?
No, not Grillo.
No Charles Schwartzel?
No.
I try to be good with pronunciation.
I've told you half my lineup for the bobble hat. You know Burns is in there.
If I pay attention, maybe.
You know Bryson, Burns is in there, and you know that Kokrak is in there.
Kokrak, Bryson.
I don't think Bryson's a lock for cash. I think Bryson's a tournament play. But, I've told you 2 out of my 6 golfers.
Okay.
Yeah, I know Xander and Burns for yours, but I'm just giving you my whole lineup. Do it that way you will. Let's finish up your player picks. I already said Bryson's one of mine as our picks to win for this week. Bryson currently 19-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. That's my first pick. Who do you have as your win pick for this week?
I will stick with Dustin Johnson, even though there's some risk in there. He's 18-1 still.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bet Sandra. I know that. But I'm gonna go with, for the purposes of this show, I like some longer shots. I'll talk about them more in the Q&A. But realistically, I'm going with Daniel Berger here at 30-1.
I was giving consideration to Berger. The reason that I wasn't like, yes, Berger, absolutely, was because it's a worse number. And I had a hard time getting over that. I think Berger was still someone I was very interested in, despite the shortened number. So
I was gonna do Matt Fitzpatrick, 65-1 was in consideration. I like that, but I don't think I need to do that for the purposes of our competition here. I liked Bubba at 100-1, but I don't think I have to do that.
Okay. I'm deciding between 2.
Who are they? And then we'll talk it out.
Well, I don't.
Is it Bubba?
No. Gosh. Okay. No. It's Tony Finau, and I know that I can't talk myself out of it because it's Finau can't win, can't close it out, blah blah blah, can't putt, blah blah blah. It's still really tempting because he's 40-1 and sets up so well based on what I want this week. So it's really tempting, but because I can't quite get there, we're gonna go the ad man himself. Get some avocados flowing through the veins of Joaquin Neiman, 65-1. He has come down. He was 80. So take that for what you will. You're getting a worse number on Neiman, so shop around, obviously. But I think Neiman grades out slightly better for me than Finau right now.
Neiman and Fitzpatrick went from 50 to 80 to 65.
Okay, so they got some action once they lengthened, basically. Okay, so I have Bryson and Neiman. You have DJ and Berger, correct?
Yeah.
And our only head-to-head was Casey versus Smith, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we have for this week. Brandon, any final thoughts for you before we close up shop here for the PGA Championship?
This is a week. It's so deep. It's such a good field. If you disagreed with what we said, that's fine because you can play it a lot of different ways. But if you think no, DJ's too hurt, I'm not going to play him, and nobody's talking about Justin Thomas, so it's going to be Justin or John Rahm. It's that's probably some of these guys are going to go under the radar. What you can really gain, how you can really gain leverage during a major week is figure out which of these superstars just naturally isn't going to be very popular and roster them heavily and hope that they win.
or take the assured winner and go Bryson D Chambeau and just play it that way. But I think it's a good week to identify the chalk, pivot from it if you have good alternatives. If you feel good about other plays, don't use plays you don't feel good about just to pivot. Don't do that. And also, I think a balanced-ish build is a good one, getting a couple guys in the 10,000 range. One thing I do want to mention next week, Brandon is off. You're taking a well-deserved vacation, so good for you. I'll be here still. We'll do a solo podcast, probably a little bit shorter, 25-ish or so minutes to get you set for next week's event. But Brandon, I'm not going to talk to you next week. What am I supposed to do?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what you should do. How am I supposed to know?
I'm sad in advance. Enjoy your vacation, though.
It's going to be a lot of hiking.
That doesn't sound like a vacation. It sounds like work. So you do that. I'll do a podcast all by myself. That is all that we have for this week here on the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. But as mentioned, we are back here 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Brandon will be answering your questions about DFS and betting. That'll be today, Tuesday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. If you miss it, you can watch a replay up on the FanDuel YouTube page as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you before the Q&A, where can they find you on Twitter?
I'm at Gdula 13, GDULA 13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your lineups for the PGA Championship. Enjoy this weekend's events. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.